Welcome to the Special Forces in World War II podcast, transmitting on this frequency. This broadcast is your dedicated channel for comprehensive intelligence regarding World War II Special Forces operations. Our transmissions encompass in-depth analysis of their strategic maneuvers, cutting-edge equipment, illustrious biographies, and an array of pertinent subjects. The orchestration of these transmissions is executed by the expert team of the Special Forces in World War II website, a squad deeply immersed in the historical theatre. For further insights, visual aids, and captured moments frozen in time, navigate to our virtual headquarters at worldwar2-soft.com. Your immersion into the front lines of knowledge awaits. Over and out. Welcome back to another episode of the Special Forces in World War II podcast, where we explore the bold, the daring, and the extraordinary tactics of special and specialized forces in World War II that helped shape the outcome of the greatest conflict in modern history. I'm your host, Michael Wires, and as always, we're here to unravel the hidden stories behind the daring exploits of special and specialized forces in World War II. In this final episode of our 5-part series on the Provisional Ranger Force during D-Day, we bring the story to its conclusion. Back in our first episode, we explored the Rangers' road to Normandy, from their arrival in Britain to relentless commando-led training. We saw how Force A, B, and C took shape through months of rigorous preparation on the Devon coast. Equipment was tested, cliffs were climbed again and again, and men were drilled until every movement became instinct. By early June 1944, their kit was stripped to essentials, their rockets and ladders were ready, and the Swan ducks were loaded for the pre-dawn launch toward the cliffs of France. In the second episode, we followed the dramatic assault on Pointe du Hoc. From the night of the 5th of June, with its heavy air raids, to the storm-tossed approach on D-Day morning, we watched Colonel Rudder's men fight the sea, the wind, and the German guns. Against machine gun fire and falling grenades, they scaled the shattered cliffs. Once on top, they fought inland, secured the coastal highway, and located the hidden 155mm guns. Those guns were destroyed, and the Rangers had achieved their mission, though their battle was far from over. Our third episode told the story of the desperate fight that followed. Scattered groups of Rangers held out on the plateau and along the highway, cut off from the sea and from each other. Communications failed, ammunition ran low, and German counterattacks came through the night. Snipers, mortars, and grenades fell without pause. The Rangers held on, barely, through courage and improvisation. By the morning of 7th June, their numbers were reduced to a fraction of their strength. Then came the first relief. A patrol from the 5th Rangers reached Colonel Rudder, linking Pointe du Hoc to the main force at last. On 8th June, elements of the 116th Regimental Combat Team and Ranger Forces B and C finally arrived, though not before a tragic friendly fire incident. Out of the 225 Rangers who had landed, fewer than 75 remained fit to fight. In our last episode, we turned to Ranger Force B, the men who stormed the western end of Omaha Beach. Their mission? Destroy Widerstands Nest 73 at Vierville, clear the defenses at Pointe de la Percée, link with Ranger Force C, and advance to Pointe du Hoc. Their attack broke open the flank of Omaha Beach, allowing the 116th Regimental Combat Team to move inland. In this last episode, we turn to Ranger Force C, the largest and final component of the Provisional Ranger Force to land on D-Day. While Colonel Rudder's men fight for survival atop Pointe du Hoc, and Force B struggles through the firestorm on Omaha Beach, Force C approaches the coast behind them. Aboard British landing craft, the men of the 5th Ranger Battalion and the remaining companies of the 2nd Rangers brace for what awaits. Unable to follow Force A due to delays and miscommunications, their mission is to follow the 116th Regimental Combat Team onto Dogwhite Beach, push inland through Vierville, and fight west toward Pointe du Hoc to relieve Rudder's surrounded force. But nothing goes as planned. As they come ashore amid burning ships and wrecked vehicles, the beach is chaos. Smoke, shattered craft, and machine gun fire sweeping the surf. Amid the confusion, they find themselves landing east of their intended sector. Yet from this era comes opportunity. Under fire, the Rangers reorganize, rally alongside the 29th Infantry Division, and lead the breakout from Omaha Beach. This is the story of Force C, the men who turned confusion into momentum, who fought through Vierville, up the bluffs, and across the fields toward Pointe du Hoc, holding the western flank of the invasion together when the success of the entire landings hung in the balance. Let's start at the beginning. Force C, under the command of Major Max Schneider, consists of the 5th Ranger Battalion, Companies A and B of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and the Ranger Cannon Platoon. The force is scheduled to land at H+60 minutes. Its mission depends entirely on the outcome of the assault at Pointe du Hoc. If Force A signals success by H+30 minutes, Force C will divert from Dog Green Beach and land instead at Pointe du Hoc at H+60. Their task will be to reinforce Force A, destroy any remaining German positions between Pointe du Hoc and the sluice gate, and prepare to repel counterattacks. They are also responsible for covering the advance of the 1st Battalion of the 116th Regimental Combat Team. Once that infantry battalion arrives, the Ranger Group will come under its command. If no signal of success is received by H+30, Force C will carry out the original plan. They will land at Dog Green at H+60, then advance rapidly overland, moving approximately 6.5 kilometers west toward Pointe du Hoc. Their objective is to approach the battery from the east, secure the position, and eliminate surrounding German strongpoints as far as the sluice gate. Once the area is secured, the Rangers will reorganize and prepare to defend. They are to hold their ground until relieved by the 1st Battalion, 116th Regimental Combat Team, after which they will come under its command. The sluice gate lies roughly 2,300 meters west of Pointe du Hoc, where the coastal road crosses the Ruisseau de Fontaine-Sainte-Marie. The Germans have used this stream to flood the surrounding fields, turning them into a natural barrier. The sluice gate is clearly marked on Allied maps and serves as an important reference point for coordination and for the movement of troops inland. Because of its size, Force C is divided into 3 landing craft assault flotillas. Companies A and B of the 2nd Ranger Battalion travel aboard HMS Prince Charles and are assigned to LCA Flotilla 501. Companies A and F of the 5th Ranger Battalion, together with much of their headquarters company, embark on HMS Prince Leopold and are carried by Flotilla 504. The remaining elements of the 5th Ranger Battalion sail aboard HMS Prince Baudouin and land via Flotilla 507. At 5:30, the 5th Ranger Battalion loads into its landing craft assault from Prince Leopold and Prince Baudouin. They begin the 16-kilometer run toward the coast of France. Morale is high, the weather is cloudy, and the sea runs choppy. Around 6:15, the LCA flotillas of Ranger Force C leave their ships, about 18 kilometers from shore. The boats carrying Companies A and B, together with the headquarters detachment of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, rendezvous with the flotillas of the 5th Rangers. The seas are heavy, the swell lifting and dropping the craft with slow, violent motion. Many men are overcome by seasickness during the run-in. Some stand to steady themselves, breathing the cold air while watching the bombardment pounding the French coastline. The Royal Navy notes in its log that the swell is heavy. As said earlier, Force C has 2 alternate plans. If Colonel James Rudder's Force A lands successfully and neutralizes the guns at Pointe du Hoc, then Force C is to follow and land at the same location. If, however, no confirmation arrives by H+30 minutes, then Force C is to divert to Dog Green Beach, landing behind the 116th Regimental Combat Team and advancing westward overland towards Pointe du Hoc. Aboard HMS Prince Charles, Royal Navy Lieutenant R.D. Turnbull waits for the codeword Crowbar from motor launch ML304, signaling that Force A has landed. Expected around H-hour 6:30, the message arrives late at 7:09. Turnbull hopes to receive the second codeword, Bingo, confirming the destruction of the guns. this should have come by 700 hours. He delays a few minutes longer, hoping that a success message might still be received. Lieutenant Colonel Schneider, meanwhile, hears the transmission of the code word splash to LCT-413. This order, issued by rudder, releases the Swan DUKWS into the water. Schneider attempts to make contact with rudder by radio, but fails. Each Ranger company carries an SCR-300 walkie-talkie, while the Royal Navy landing craft have their own radios as backup. However, most of Force A's SCR-300 sets are damaged by seawater either en route or during the landing. Rudder is expected to send the message, "Praise the Lord," to Schneider, around H hour to confirm the landing at Pointe du Hoc. No such message reaches Schneider. Another code word, tilt, is to be transmitted if the assault fails or if rudder opts to redirect Force C to Dog Green Beach. An unintelligible message is received at 7:15. The only recognizable word is Charlie. The SCR-284 is set up, but fails to contact either Force A or the headquarters ship, HMS Prince Charles. Radio communications aboard the guidecraft ML-163 also fail. This unintelligible transmission lends credence to the theory that rudder attempted contact, but the signal was garbled or lost. Given that Schneider was near the edge of the SCR-300's effective range, the communication failure is entirely plausible. Faced with confusion and silence from Force A, Turnbull and Schneider conclude that the Pointe du Hoc landing has not succeeded. At 7:15, they jointly decide to execute Plan 2 and divert Ranger Force C to Dog Green Beach. Although they do not know it at the time, the 15-minute delay in reaching this decision spares them from heavier losses. Dog Green Beach remains under fierce fire earlier in the hour. As said, sea conditions are poor, with heavy swell and a following sea. Station keeping proves difficult due to these conditions, but formation discipline remains steady. Around 7 a.m., all three flotillas arrive at Point Queenie off Omaha Beach. They wait there until 7:15, when Schneider and Turnbull give the order to proceed to Dog Green. Motor launch ML-163 moves to the front of the formation to guide the landing. About 8 kilometers from shore, one landing craft assault takes on so much water that it drops out of formation. On board are the 1st Platoon and part of Company F headquarters. These men do not land with the battalion. They later transfer to a passing landing craft tank and reach the Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer beach exit at 9 o'clock. LCA Flotilla 501, carrying Companies A and B of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, leads the advance. Flotillas 504 and 507, bearing the 5th Ranger Battalion, follow at 4-minute intervals. At a distance of roughly 1,200 meters from shore, the flotillas deploy from column into line abreast formation, preparing to land amidst heavy resistance. The beach is heavily protected. Underwater obstacles include steel elements, hedgehogs, and tetrahedra, many armed with telemines. Mortar and artillery shells burst among these barriers, while small arms fire sweeps the shoreline. A seawall, 1.2 meters high, runs across the beach about 70 meters from the water's edge. American troops take cover behind it. A thick pall of smoke hangs over the rising ground beyond, masking the bluffs and the German positions overlooking the beach. 6 landing craft. Assault of the 2nd Ranger Battalion make up the first wave, landing at H plus 70 minutes. From left to right, they form a line of 6. The battalion headquarters craft, 2 LCAs carrying Company B, 2 from Company A, and the headquarters group LCA. At 7:35, as Flotilla 501 closes on the beach, German mortar fire begins to fall among the boats. LCA 401, carrying 2nd Platoon of Company B, takes a direct hit. The explosion tears off its bow. The coxswain is killed instantly. Lieutenant Bob Fitzsimmons, the platoon leader, is also killed outright. Sergeant Major Rubenstein orders the men to abandon ship. The Rangers jump into the water, swimming the last 90 meters through surf and debris. At least 5 drown. Several others are wounded. Despite the rising fire, the remaining coxswains steer with remarkable skill through the mine-tipped beach obstacles. The surviving craft of Flotilla 501 reach the shore between 7:40 and 7:52. When the ramps drop, German machine gun fire rips through the openings. Men are cut down instantly. Survivors dive into the sea, wading or swimming the last stretch beneath the tracer fire. Some crawl the final distance, as they had in training. Others duck underwater before sprinting across the open 90-meter beach to the seawall. Technician 5th grade Ray of Company A stands upright amid the chaos, calmly judging the arcs of enemy fire. He shifts aside from the spurts of sand as bursts walk toward him. Later that day, he will again stand exposed, firing his BAR from the hip and cutting down several German gunners. The German defenses at Widerstandsnest 70, positioned just inland above a row of seaside villas, open fire with mortars and machine guns. The position is manned by fewer than a platoon, but from its height, it commands the beach. The Rangers are pinned in place. Captain Edgar Arnold loses his weapon when a bullet shatters his carbine. Lieutenant Robert Bryce is struck in the head and killed instantly. Only 27 men of Company B make it to the seawall, many landing off course and scattered along the strand. Company A lands to the east, near several M4A1 duplex drive tanks of Company B, 743rd Tank Battalion. Several of the tanks are already burning, knocked out by an 88mm gun from Widerstandsnest 72. Lieutenant Stan White tries to direct the surviving tanks onto German targets. At one, there is no response. At another, the commander engages a machine gun nest, only to be hit moments later by the same 88. The tank erupts in flame. White is concussed by the blast and later evacuated to hospital. Captain Joe Rafferty reaches the beach and sees men still sheltering behind obstacles offshore. He wades back into the water, shouting for them to move forward. A burst of fire hits him in the legs. As he falls, another shot strikes his head and kills him instantly. Lieutenant Bob Edlin leads 1st Platoon. His craft grounds on a sandbar 70 meters out. He pleads with the British coxswain to take the LCA closer. The man, weeping, refuses but insists on landing with them. Only 14 of the 34 Rangers reach the shingle. Edlin is wounded returning to the beach, dragged to safety by Sergeant Bill Klaus. With all officers either wounded or dead, Platoon Sergeant Bill White takes command. Realizing they have come ashore too far east, the surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion begin moving west along the sea wall. They advance under continuous fire, cross the beach road, and start climbing the bluffs in a southwesterly direction toward Pointe du Hoc. The slope is steep, but offers better cover than the open sand. Shell craters, burning grass, and smoke from the naval bombardment conceal their movement. Around 35 men of Company A reach the seawall and press on up the hill. By 8 a.m., fewer than half the men of Companies A and B have reached the seawall. Battalion Headquarters Detachment has also taken heavy losses. The first officer off the landing craft is struck by mortar fragments. Survivors of the Headquarters Group assist the medics, dragging the wounded to cover and treating them where they lie on the sand. Most of the command post equipment has been lost in the surf. The remaining men pick up rifles and begin clearing out snipers along the beach. A few scattered tanks fire sporadically at German positions, their shells bursting against the slopes. The Rangers see no other infantry nearby and believe they are alone. Less than 400 meters to the left, the 5th Ranger Battalion begins landing on the already crowded beach. Company A starts to move first, at first as isolated men, then in small groups. Under fire, the company reorganizes itself under its senior, non-commissioned officers. Every officer has fallen on the beach. The unit will remain without officers until D+2. Within minutes of reaching the wall and using smoke and the cover of wrecked buildings, Sergeant White leads fewer than a dozen men across the promenade road. They crawl into the shrubs and shell holes around the ruined villas on the flat behind the beach and begin climbing the bluffs. Others from Company B follow. About 15 men make it to the top in the first attempt. There, they destroy the machine gun that killed Captain Rafferty and begin clearing nearby trenches. A machine gun section from Company D of the 116th Regimental Combat Team joins them. Small groups led by Sergeants Fuda and James also reach the slopes. Sergeant James directs the fire of the supporting tanks below. 3 Sherman DD tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion engage enemy positions on the flanks, silencing several guns. James climbs the hill alone, then returns under fire, shouting for the men below to follow. 2 Rangers from Company A are the first to reach the crest. They find trenches and 2 or 3 machine guns just beyond. 6 more Rangers soon join them. As they move forward, German soldiers emerge from dugouts and open fire. The defenders react too late. The lead Rangers are already within 20 meters, and more men are climbing up behind them. Working in pairs and small groups, the Rangers storm the emplacements. They kill several defenders and capture 6 prisoners. Only 3 Rangers are hit. Company B comes up soon after, abandoning its original attempt to force the Vierville exit. Captain Edgar Arnold gathers 18 survivors of Company B near the Vierville draw and turns them to the right, hugging the base of the slope. They move several hundred meters toward the draw, hoping to climb the exit as originally planned. Heavy machine gun fire forces them back. They fall back to the villas and make contact with tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion. Sergeant Rubenstein is sent to fetch tank support but is shot through the throat. Thought dead, he lies unconscious for a time before reviving, asking a tank crewman for a cigarette and calmly rejoining Arnold's group. This fighting takes place between 8 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. The action widens the penetration on Dog White and secures the right flank of the main advance eastward. By 8:30, Weiderstan's Nest 70 is largely cleared. To the left, the 5th Ranger Battalion appears on the bluff top. The remnants of the 2 companies of the 2nd Battalion link up with them for the advance inland. The German strongpoint has been overcome by a handful of determined Rangers. It has taken just under 75 minutes from landing to reach this point. Men from Company D of the 116th Infantry Regiment also join the assault. With both companies of the 2nd Ranger Battalion depleted, Force C releases them from their mission of leading the 5th Ranger Battalion. Company C of the 2nd joins them on the bluffs near Vierville. Captain Edgar Arnold, now the senior surviving officer, assumes command of the combined force and reorganizes the survivors into a single understrength company. Together, they move inland in reserve behind the 5th Ranger Battalion. The 5th Ranger Battalion followed behind the 2nd Ranger Battalion in 2 waves. LCA Flotilla 504, commanded by Lieutenant J.M.F. Cassidy Royal Navy Volunteer Reserves, brings in the first wave. It departs HMS Prince Leopold before dawn, carrying Companies A, B, and E, along with half the battalion headquarters. The almost 20 kilometers passage through choppy seas leaves many Rangers seasick. As navigation launch ML-163 departs, around 7:15, German mortar fire begins targeting the flotilla 1,200 meters from shore. From their craft, Schneider and Cassidy witness the devastating fire engulfing Dog Green Beach, where Company A, 116th Regimental Combat Team, is being destroyed. A radio message from the Beachmaster reports that Dog White Beach is clear. Schneider and Cassidy agree to divert east, where there is less resistance. The landing point lies about 730 meters east of exit D1, their original target Dog Green, because enemy fire there is too heavy. The area near the draw is a deadly kill zone, where Able Company, 116th Regimental Combat Team, suffers catastrophic losses earlier. Flotilla 504 holds position, watching Flotilla 501 struggle under fire. Lieutenant Cassidy decides to land to the left of 501, using the smoke from burning grass to shield the landing. This smoke is the result of naval bombardment and now drifts over the beach and bluffs. At 80 meters from shore, the 7 landing craft assault fan out. The coxswains skillfully steer through mines, Belgian gates, hedgehogs, and tetrahedra. All 7 craft reach the beach without loss. The Rangers wade ashore in knee-deep water. The after-action report notes that the first wave lands at 8 o'clock. They cross the beach in good order and reach the seawall with only light casualties. There, they reorganize under cover of the wall and prepare to advance inland. The second wave of the 5th Ranger Battalion, LCA Flotilla 507, commanded by Lieutenant E. H. West of the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve, follows behind the earlier wave. It carries companies C, D, and F of the 5th Ranger Battalion, along with the remaining half of battalion headquarters. About 8 kilometers from shore, LCA 578, carrying 1st Platoon and part of F Company headquarters, begins taking on water. The engine compartment floods rapidly. The coxswain proposes turning back, but Captain William Runch refuses. He insists they continue. Water rises chest-high inside the craft. The Rangers bail as best they can, then transfer to LCT 88. That group reaches the beach later in the morning. The remaining 6 LCAs continue toward the coast. Half a kilometer from shore, the formation splits, each coxswain steering independently through the obstacles. Despite the danger, all 6 landing craft reach the beach by 0805. Artillery shells crash along the water's edge. Bodies lie scattered across the sand, from the surf line to the seawall. Ahead of them, a landing craft infantry touches down. Men begin to move down the side ramps. A violent explosion strikes the starboard ramp, an artillery round that ignites a flamethrower tank. Fire sweeps the deck in seconds, engulfing the ship in a sheet of flame. The Rangers' craft land within a line of stone breakwaters. The massive concrete blocks absorb some of the blast and give a brief measure of protection amid the chaos. The Rangers disembark in less than half a meter of water and begin moving up the beach. Flotilla 507 comes under lighter fire than the others. 2 landing craft infantry large, offshore, draw most of the enemy's attention. One of these, LCI L91, lands around 7:40. It hits an obstacle fitted with a telemine. The explosion disables its starboard ramp. As troops disembark from the port side, an 88mm shell hits the well deck and ignites the fuel tanks. The vessel bursts into flames. By the time Flotilla 507 reaches the shore, LCIL 91 is a blazing wreck. 3 of the Ranger LCAs land within the billowing smoke, using it as partial cover. As the tide rises, many of the obstacles are now submerged. One of the LCAs strikes a telemine that, by luck, detaches and sinks without detonating. The Rangers press on, landing under intermittent fire. The delay in their approach and the decision to land farther east work in their favor. The 5th Ranger Battalion suffers minimal losses. This sector is less heavily fortified than the Vierville draw, and the wooden breakwaters along the seawall offer some protection. On the beach, the Rangers link up with elements of C Company 116th Regimental Combat Team. That unit was supposed to land on Dog Green, but has drifted east onto Dog White. The error spares many of their men. Only 4 or 5 Rangers are lost in the landing. Nearly 450 men make it safely across the beach and up to the seawall. 1 platoon from F Company, however, lands far to the east, near the Saint Laurent draw, an area still strongly held. They try to fight west to rejoin the battalion, but are pinned down by artillery and machine gun fire and remain cut off for much of the day. The 5th Ranger Battalion reorganizes behind the seawall. Sergeants and lieutenants move among the men, shouting, sorting, and trying to form coherent groups for the next phase of the assault. The scene bears little resemblance to the maps or the sand table models studied in England. The seawall in front of them is not stone as expected, but a rough barrier of timber logs, barely a meter high. Confusion spreads. The terrain makes no sense. Where are they? If they were right of Vierville, cliffs would block their view, with the Pointe de la Percée visible beyond. That cannot be. Then the truth dawns. They must have landed to the left of the planned point of attack. Through the smoke and gunfire, a stocky officer appears, walking steadily towards Sergeant Richard Hathaway, who is preparing a Bangalore torpedo. The man has a cigar in his mouth. He calls out, "What outfit is this?" Hathaway, busy setting the charge, answers, "We're the Rangers." The officer replies, "Let's get off this beach." Without looking up, Hathaway yells back, "As soon as we blow this fucking wire." Then he realizes who he is talking to. The man is a brigadier general. The stocky officer is Brigadier General Norman Cota, Assistant Divisional Commander of the 29th Infantry Division. He came ashore around 7:45 and has been moving up and down the beach, rallying men of the 116th Regimental Combat Team. urging them forward through the fire. Seeing the Rangers assembled behind the seawall, he stops and says, "We're getting murdered down here. Let's get murdered up there." General Cota walks calmly along the beach, bullets snapping overhead, shouting encouragement to the men huddled behind the logs. Captain John Rain of the 5th Rangers spots him and is struck by his composure. Cota radiates control, authority, and calm amid chaos. Ryan runs over, salutes, and reports the situation. The 5th Ranger Battalion has landed largely intact, both here and 200 meters to the east, and is advancing toward its objectives by platoon infiltration. Cota listens for a moment, then raises his voice so that everyone nearby can hear. "You men are Rangers. I know you won't let me down." With that, he strides off toward Colonel Schneider. Further down the line, General Cota encounters Easy Company. Captain Luther, not recognizing his rank, snaps at him to stop interfering. Cota, unshaken, tells him to advance. Luther refuses, insisting he will handle his own men. Cota leaves without argument and continues on. At Ranger headquarters, he finds Lieutenant Colonel Schneider. "Are you Colonel Schneider of the Rangers?" he calls out. "Yes, sir," Schneider replies. Cota wastes no words. "Colonel, you're going to have to lead the way. We're bogged down. We've got to get these men off this goddamn beach." That single order changes the battle. The Rangers are told to lead the breakout. Schneider's battalion is to assault directly up the bluffs, advancing by platoons. It is a near impossible task. The men are scattered across the sand, some too far to hear orders. Lieutenant Colonel Schneider returns to his staff through smoke and shell bursts. Sergeant Herb Epstein, crouched behind the seawall, asks why he had been standing upright in the open under fire. Schneider grins and replies, "Well, he was standing, and I wasn't going to be lying down there." Without hesitation, Schneider gives the order to advance. Captain Whittington of B Company directs Lieutenant Pepper to place a Bangalore torpedo beneath the double-apron barbed wire fence running along the seawall. Private Fred Rogers crawls forward, dragging the explosive tube through the sand. Moments later, he detonates it, blasting a gap wide enough for men to pass through. Scouts move first, Whittington close behind. The hillside is thick with smoke. Someone shouts for gas masks, and several men pull them on, choking as they climb through fumes and dust. More Bangalore torpedoes go off in rapid succession, blowing 4 gaps in the wire, 3 single, 1 double. At the signal, "Tally-ho!" the 5th Ranger Battalion surges forward, scaling the seawall and beginning the climb. The smoke from fires along the bluffs conceals their movement, but adds to the confusion. The slopes are steep, the earth loose and slick from rain and bombardment. The climb turns into a crawl. In one platoon, a lieutenant starts the ascent with 30 men and reaches the top with only 2. Captain Whittington is among the first to reach the summit. With Private Carl Weist, he flanks a machine gun nest and kills its 3-man crew. The Rangers push forward, clearing the immediate area. Remarkably, the battalion loses only 8 men in the climb. By 8:30, most of the 5th Ranger Battalion has reached the top. Schneider orders a halt to regroup. The smoke and broken ground have scattered the companies. He sends runners to restore order and re-establish contact across the front. On the slopes below, survivors of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, now without officers, join the 5th Rangers. Captain Edgar Arnold takes command of a provisional company formed from these men. They help clear Whitestan's Nest 71 on the eastern edge of the Vierville draw, capturing 6 German soldiers. At 9:10, the USS Ancon receives a message from the Rangers. The tide is rising rapidly, the beach obstacles are still in place, and a demolition squad is urgently needed. At the same time, Company C of the 116th Regimental Combat Team begins climbing the bluffs. Together with the Rangers, they press inland, clearing German positions between Whitestan's Nest 70 and Whitestan's Nest 71. Between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., around 600 men leave Dog White. Company C of the 116th Regimental Combat Team moves first, followed by most of Ranger Force C, the regimental headquarters, and Companies B, F, and G of the 116th. The engineers of the 121st Combat Battalion follow last. They reach the crest in small groups, bunching together in the first fields, beyond the bluffs. Order quickly breaks down as later arrivals intermingle with the lead elements. Reorganization is slow and difficult. Snipers, long-range machine gun fire, and brief shelling from 8.8 centimeter guns add to the confusion. For nearly 2 hours, progress inland stalls. After 9 o'clock, the main command group of the 116th Regimental Combat Team finally reaches the top. They find Rangers and infantry scattered across the fields, some already near the coastal highway. Their communications section has landed on another beach. The only working radio belongs to a tank battalion liaison officer. Colonel Cannon is effectively cut off, without contact with his battalion headquarters and without information on the status of the beach exits. He can only assume the rest of the regiment is pushing forward to its assembly areas. At 9:28, another message reaches the USS Ancon. The Rangers report that German gunfire continues to cover exits D and G, and that a battery positioned behind Dog Green is still firing on the beach, hampering the landings below. One story is worth telling separately. Once the Rangers reach the sea wall, Lieutenant Charles H. Parker of Company A, 5th Ranger Battalion, orders his men to clear the wire. He calls for Bangalores to be brought forward. Rangers James Gabbery and Richard Hathaway immediately respond. Working with calm precision under fire, they connect the tubular explosive sections one by one, each joint fastened tightly to ensure the charge will carry its full length beneath the obstacle. The completed assembly forms a long, flexible explosive tube designed to blast a gap through the German wire. Crawling forward under enemy observation, they push the torpedoes into position at the base of the fence. Gabbery sets the fuse and dives away. The explosion hurls him off the ground, slamming him back into the sand. For a few seconds, he lies stunned, then forces himself up. The charge has worked. His own life and those of the men behind him depend on keeping the advance moving. The blast tears open a narrow breach, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. Parker immediately leads his company forward, guiding them through the smoke-filled opening ahead of the main body. Under continuous fire, they rush across the scrub and start climbing the bluff hand over hand, finding grip in fissures and rough patches of earth. Thick smoke drifts across the slope, forcing many to wear their gas masks. Visibility drops to almost nothing, and contact between sections is lost as small groups come under scattered fire. Parker leads his men across the open fields above the cliffs, still largely intact despite the climb. Heavy machine gun and sniper fire rakes the ground from positions farther inland. Parker feels the sharp tug of bullets slicing through his pack as he crawls across the field. Nearby, First Lieutenant William Moody is struck in the head and collapses, badly wounded. Technician 5th grade William Fox is hit moments later, a bullet passing through his shoulder and severing his spine. He dies where he falls. Parker's invasion vest, designed to carry ammunition, grenades, and rations, proves a liability. Bullets tear through the heavy fabric as he fights to remove it. He finally rips it free and leaves it behind, carrying only his pistol as he presses on. Staying low, Parker leads his men through drainage ditches and hedgerows, advancing toward Vierville-sur-Mer. Unbeknown to him, an incident halts the rear of the column. Lieutenant Souchier, one of his platoon leaders, is hit, possibly in the hand or ankle, perhaps both. The men stop to help him, breaking the formation. Parker, unaware, continues forward with only 26 men, not realizing half his company has fallen behind. The country roads are narrow, hemmed in by high hedgerows that form green tunnels, perfect ground for ambush. Parker decides to leave the road and move across open fields. They encounter several sharp engagements as they push inland. In one fight, the Rangers capture around 20 Germans. The number of prisoners almost equals their own strength. Killing them is out of the question, but taking them along would slow their progress. Parker orders the prisoners disarmed and released. Later, the group is ambushed again on a sunken road between two hedgerows. Grenades come flying out of the foliage. The Rangers react instantly, grabbing the grenades and hurling them back before they explode. The blasts kill the Germans who had thrown them. The Rangers push on, fighting through scattered resistance as they advance toward Vierville. The terrain inland proves as dangerous as the beach. The fields are divided by high, earthen embankments covered in dense growth, hedgerows that stand more than a meter high and just as thick. They form a maze of narrow, sunken lanes where overhanging branches provide perfect concealment for German snipers and machine guns. Fire sweeps the open patches of ground. Men fall as they try to move forward. The shelling forces many to shed their equipment, keeping only weapons and ammunition to stay mobile. Parker leads his company through drainage ditches to avoid the exposed areas. Staying low, they follow the line of the ditch toward a nearby chateau. Sniper fire continues throughout the movement. By mid-afternoon, around 1400 hours, Parker and his men reach their first rendezvous point and begin searching the area. In the short distance since the beach, they have taken 12 prisoners and killed roughly the same number. At 1710, a German report from the 2nd Battalion, Grenadier Regiment 915, records that enemy forces have bypassed their position near Chateau Colville and broken through to the south. It notes that wounded men can no longer be evacuated. In reality, Parker's small detachment has cut the German rear from its forward elements. Their presence and brief clashes with German groups heading for the coast convince the defenders that the area has fallen to a much larger force. At the rendezvous point, near a French farmhouse, the Rangers take stock. Of the 72 men who landed on the beach, only 26 remained together. Exhausted and dehydrated, they search the outbuildings and barns. The farm appears deserted, though it was clearly active the day before. Assuming other Ranger elements have already passed through, Parker decides not to linger. Within minutes, he orders his men to move out and continue inland. By 1430, Parker and his Rangers move out from Chateau de Vaumicelle. As Company A advances, their progress is punctuated by short, violent encounters. During the push toward Pointe du Hoc, a German soldier suddenly appears with his weapon raised. A Ranger reacts instantly, shooting him dead at close range. Such moments define the fighting that morning: swift, brutal, and unforgiving. The company continues along narrow roads, flanked by hedgerows, trading fire with small enemy groups. Around 20 more prisoners are taken. Again, the Rangers disarm and release them rather than risk being slowed down. The decision proves practical and may have encouraged later German surrenders once word spread that the Rangers did not kill captives. Lieutenant Parker studies his map and directs the reduced force along a dirt road toward Inglesqueville, the route joining the main highway to Auguay and Pointe du Hoc. When they check strength, 3 men are missing: Staff Sergeant William Scott, Private First Class Henry Santos, and Private First Class George Chiatello. The unit is now about 2.5 kilometers inland, 16 kilometers from its final objective, and down to just 23 men. Near Inglesqueville, the Rangers encounter 2 German soldiers on bicycles. One flees into a nearby house, prompting a grenade attack that produces no result. Continuing through the village, the column moves into tighter lanes bordered by high hedges, ideal ground for ambush. Parker reinforces the lead element just as fire erupts again. Enemy troops try to outflank them through the adjoining fields. The captured Germans, now a hindrance, are released inside a nearby farm before the Rangers continue. Moving swiftly through the fields, they break contact under intermittent fire. Ranger Callard is wounded in the exchange, but the column keeps its momentum. Parker's decision to release the prisoners and change direction allows Company A to outpace the enemy and preserve what remains of its fighting strength. This will allow them to complete their mission. After a long and difficult approach, Parker's small detachment finally reaches the defensive perimeter of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, south of the Grand Camp Vierville Road, at about 2100 hours. The men are exhausted but intact. Still believing the rest of the 5th Ranger Battalion to be close behind, Lieutenant Parker reports to Colonel Rudder and informs him that reinforcements are on the way. Meanwhile, as the rest of Force C encounter minefields atop the bluff, Lieutenant Colonel Schneider orders the battalion to switch to column formation. Captain Whittington's B Company takes the lead, with Lieutenant Bernard Pepper's 1st Platoon on point. The Rangers move cautiously through the smoke and wreckage, meeting small, scattered groups of German soldiers along the way. Approaching the Vierville-Grand Camp Road, the column comes under fire from the direction of Vierville-sur-Mer. German artillery begins to fall on the rear companies. E and C companies attempt to push south, but meet determined resistance from entrenched positions. Attempts to call in naval or artillery support fail. The enemy is too close to the American line for indirect fire to be used safely. By 10:43, Force C reaches the eastern edge of Vierville-sur-Mer. Sniper fire sweeps the approaches, and Rangers pick off the marksmen one by one. 2 sniper positions are destroyed inside nearby houses. Patrols move through the village, clearing the buildings room by room, while the rest of the column advances slowly behind them. At 11 o'clock, Hauptmann Berthy's 7th Company of Grenadier Regiment, 916, begins a counterattack. The company, composed of German infantry and Turkmen conscripts, advances directly into the Rangers' line of march. Lieutenant Pepper's platoon takes fire from a wheat field. He maneuvers his men to the flank and assaults the German position, overrunning it and killing several of the defenders. Mortar shells begin to fall around them. Facing mounting fire, Captain Whittington orders a withdrawal to the road to regroup. After assessing the situation, the Rangers decide to advance through Vierville rather than attempt a flanking movement around it. B Company enters Vierville around midday. The rest of the battalion follows, passing through the village by 1400 hours. C Company of the 116th Regimental Combat Team has already moved through earlier, clearing the main street and several adjoining buildings, leaving the way open for the Rangers. Despite this, radio contact with higher command cannot be established. Their communications equipment is still unreliable, and no messages can be transmitted to the beach or brigade headquarters. Outside the village, Captain Whittington and Sergeant Thornhill take cover beside the road. Brigadier General Norman Cota appears again, moving calmly among the men as shells burst nearby. He urges them to keep pushing forward. When Whittington warns that snipers are still active in the area, Cota shakes his head and replies, "There are no snipers." A bullet cracks overhead and smacks into the wall behind him. The general pauses, looks up, and mutters dryly, "Well, there may be one." Once Vierville is secured, Lieutenant Colonel Schneider orders 3 companies to push west toward Pointe du Hoc. The Rangers form up on the coastal road and resume the advance. The plan is straightforward. The force is to follow the coastal road until the junction leading to the point, then swing south for a flanking move and launch a frontal assault on the German positions. Captain Whittington's B Company leads as the point element. A and C companies follow in support, while elements of the 116th Infantry Regiment make up the main body behind them. 4 tanks are placed under Ranger control for direct fire support. The column moves cautiously along the coastal route, advancing through scattered German machine gun and police posts. Each time they try to flank a position, fire erupts from another quarter, slowing progress and draining time. Frustrated, Schneider eventually abandons attempts to envelop the enemy guns and orders the column to bypass south of Vierville. The Rangers continue west through the town along the main road. By late afternoon, the men are exhausted but steady. The weather is cool and overcast, mercifully mild for early June. A hotter day, they know, would have broken their endurance completely. Around 1700, they reach the hamlet of Gruchy, where the advance halts under renewed German small arms fire. 2nd Platoon of B Company comes under a sudden artillery barrage. Ranger Banning is killed instantly. Sergeant Walker McElwain's left forearm is shattered by shrapnel. He refuses evacuation, binding the wound himself and continuing to fight for several hours before finally being ordered to the rear. Colonel Charles Cannon, commanding officer of the 116th Regimental Combat Team, arrives soon after with barely 150 men left from his regiment. Only fragments of the 116th have managed to reach the bluff. A handful of Rangers, 7 men from 2nd Platoon, along with a major, a captain, and several enlisted troops, make their way to Cannon's command post, one of the few properly established positions according to the original plan. Most of Cannon's men remain pinned on the beaches under fire. The Rangers are immediately assigned as his command post guard. For a time, It seems to Cannon that these Rangers are the only organized force available in the sector. Facing the threat of a German counterattack along a 7-kilometer front, his effective strength consists largely of the 5th Ranger Battalion, men technically outside his chain of command. They should already have been on their way to relieve Pointe du Hoc, but instead they are holding the line around Vierville, securing the right flank of the beachhead. Cannon orders the Rangers to hold firm. With no word from Pointe du Hoc and few reinforcements ashore, he fears that a determined German counterattack could still drive the landings back into the sea. By assigning the 5th Rangers to a defensive role at Vierville, he unknowingly prevents the planned relief of the Pointe du Hoc force, leaving them isolated atop the cliffs. By 1935, the 5th Ranger Battalion has reached the western edge of Vierville. Schneider orders a perimeter established. The 116th Infantry has not advanced on the left, and no contact is made. An observation post is set up in a small shed at the village outskirts. At the same time, German radio intercepts describe heavy local fighting around Colleville and Vierville. Reports from Grenadier Regiment 914 state that Allied troops have breached the obstacle belt near Pointe du Hoc and are pushing westward. Captain John Ryan receives orders from Major Sullivan to move around a field and deliberately draw enemy fire. The goal is to expose German machine gun positions and allow the rest of the battalion to advance onto the plateau. Ryan carries out the order, sprinting in a zigzag pattern across 70 to 90 meters of open ground under direct fire. He dives into a ditch on the far side, landing beside the body of a dead German soldier. Around 2200 hours, Grenadier Regiment 916 reports that elements of Pionnier Battalion 352 are engaged in close quarters fighting inside Vierville. During the action, they recover from a dead American officer a full set of operational plans belonging to the USV Corps. German attention begins to shift east. Divisional Commander General Dietrich Kreis concludes that the main Allied thrust lies around Saint-Laurent, Colleville, and Annelles. Forward observers at Pointe-de-la-Percée report that the Vierville draw remains blocked. German reserves start redeploying eastward. Even Hauptmann Berthi's 7th Compagnie is diverted towards Saint-Laurent. As night falls, the Rangers of Force C dig in around Vierville. The battered remnants of Force B, under Captain Ralph Goranson, reach them around 2200 hours. Of the 192 Rangers of the 2nd Battalion who landed that morning on Omaha Beach, only 80 remain fit for combat. In the darkness, other Rangers move through abandoned trenches and shattered bunkers. 2 men from Company A watch as Germans emerge from their dugouts to reoccupy positions after the bombardment. Acting in pairs and small groups, the Rangers clear each post in turn, killing several defenders and capturing 6 prisoners before the line finally falls silent. Earlier that afternoon, while Force C is moving towards Vierville, another Ranger company starts landing. The Ranger Cannon Company of the 2nd Ranger Battalion reaches the beach while chaos mixes with organization. Naval beachmasters wave signal flags, shouting orders over the din, trying to bring order to the confusion. Smoke, debris, and sporadic enemy fire blanket the shoreline. Bodies, wrecked vehicles, and scattered equipment lie across the sand. Communications have broken down completely. It is impossible to move toward the Vierville draw as planned. Lieutenant Kennard orders his men to blow a gap through the German concertina wire, running beside the gravel road between the seawall and the anti-tank ditch. In the attempt to get the half-tracks over the beach wall and onto the road, one vehicle burns out its clutch. The other is hit by an explosive round and bursts into flames. Kennard loses 2 Rangers to scattered rifle and mortar fire before the situation stabilizes. Kennard later gives a precise description of the terrain. Along the high water mark runs a 15-meter strip of shingle, made up of small rounded stones about 5 centimeters in diameter, forming a ridge that slopes sharply toward the sea. The loose surface is treacherous, making movement for men and vehicles difficult and exhausting. During the advance, Kennard encounters part of a platoon from the 5th Ranger Battalion, led by a young lieutenant. They join forces and attack enemy positions on the escarpment above. Together, they climb halfway up the slope and reach a large concrete emplacement built into the cliff face. The structure resembles a bunker, its front cut away to face the water. It appears designed to mount a heavy mortar rather than a gun, giving it wide lateral fields of fire. Kennard notes that only a direct naval hit could have destroyed such a strongpoint. By the end of the engagement, Kennard's detachment has taken no further losses. They capture several prisoners and secure the position. The skies remain empty, no German aircraft appear, and no Allied ships are visible close inshore. Amid the wreckage and confusion, the surviving Rangers hold one of the few organized footholds in the western sector of Omaha that morning. The 5th Ranger Battalion platoon Kennard encountered belongs to F Company, which landed near Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer under intense artillery and machine gun fire. Several patrols are sent to locate the battalion but fail to make contact. Attempting to move west along the beach toward Vierville-sur-Mer, the platoon advances about 550 meters before being caught in concentrated artillery fire, suffering 8 casualties. Outnumbered and unable to advance, they dig in and remain pinned down as darkness falls. At first light, Lieutenant Kennard and his surviving cannon platoon, about 8 men, link up with half a platoon from the 5th Ranger Battalion. Together, they attack a German trench system through a narrow gully leading up the bluff. Pushing through thick barbed wire, they reach the enemy line and force several defenders to surrender. By mid-morning, around 9 or 10 o'clock, they enter the trenches and begin collecting weapons and documents from the prisoners, piling them onto a blanket. Kennard takes his first Luger pistol, a prized trophy among frontline soldiers who have fought at close range. Soon after, a group of 10 or 15 men from the 116th Regimental Combat Team arrive and try to take custody of the prisoners. The Rangers, having done the fighting, order them back to their unit. They collect all German documents for intelligence purposes and question one prisoner who reveals the entrance to a hidden tunnel about 90 meters from the cliff edge. Inside, the Rangers find rolls of money and stores of equipment. The position is well constructed, with stairways cut into the bluff and natural protection from bombardment. In total, they capture about 40 prisoners. The engagement is brief but fierce, fought at close quarters until the Germans surrender. After escorting the captives down to the beach, an American officer, learning they are Rangers, provides them with an assault craft. Kennard and his men embark and head west along the coast, bound for Pointe du Hoc to reinforce the hard-pressed Rangers of Force A still holding out on the cliffs. Around 5:30, a German probing attack by elements of Grenadier Regiment 916 strikes B Company of the 121st Engineers, 29th Infantry Division, at the Ormel Farm. The isolated company holds firm, repelling the assault with small arms fire. At 5:35, the Gleaves-class destroyer USS Ellison is ordered to relieve USS Harding in the naval bombardment line. By 7 a.m., she establishes visual communication with the Ranger Shore Fire Control Party, and by 8 a.m., voice radio contact is secured. At approximately 6 a.m., senior American commanders gather in Vierville-sur-Mer. Colonel Charles Cannon, commanding officer of the 116th Regimental Combat Team, meets with Lieutenant Colonel Metcalf of the 1st Battalion, 116th Infantry, and Lieutenant Colonel Schneider of the Rangers. The western flank has been relatively quiet overnight, and Cannon agrees to dispatch a relief force toward Pointe du Hoc. Task Force Metcalf is formed. It consists of the 5th Ranger Battalion, the 3 surviving companies of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, the 1st Battalion of the 116th Regimental Combat Team, and 6 M4 Sherman tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion. The 2nd Rangers now number only 80 men. The 1st Battalion, 116th Infantry, musters around 130, mostly Charlie Company under Captain Bert Hawkes. The 5th Ranger Battalion contributes roughly 400 men. The force departs Vierville between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, advancing in infantry tank teams. The 20 survivors of Company A, 2nd Ranger Battalion, form the point, moving directly along the Grand Camp Road toward Pointe du Hoc. Meanwhile, Captain John Ryan leads a 4-man patrol north of the coastal road to clear out scattered German troops. Accompanied by the battalion's sergeant major, the supply sergeant, and a rifleman, he drives off several stragglers before continuing alone down the Vierville exit road toward the 29th Infantry Division headquarters. The others return to rejoin the advancing column of Rangers, infantry, and tanks. Reporting to Major General Charles Gerhardt, Ryan explains the situation and requests ammunition and food. Gerhardt assigns Lieutenant Shea to accompany him back to Vierville with supplies. Together with an engineering sergeant, they de-waterproof a jeep, load it with mortar and machine gun ammunition, and start back toward the front. The road is eerily quiet. At a crossroads near Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, Rain takes the right-hand fork after spotting signs of earlier fighting on both routes. As they proceed, snipers fire several times. One bullet knocks Rain's helmet clean off, landing it in his lap. Later, machine gun fire pins them down in open ground. With no cover, they crawl under a low hedgerow barely a meter high, dragging the jeep with them for about 30 meters until the hedge thickens enough to hide their movement. Soon, they reach the rear of the 5th Ranger Column, distributing ammunition and rations to the men and giving rides to the walking wounded. The jeep eventually runs out of fuel. Its tank punctured by bullets during the firefight. They push it into a farmyard at Saint-Pierre-du-Mont and continue on foot to rejoin Major Sullivan. By then, all plans have changed. A German counterattack has struck the Ranger column just as it began to move out. The attack, supported by tree-burst artillery that Rain later believes originated from the Maisie Battery, hits hard near the road. Spotting tanks of the 743rd Tank Battalion standing idle, Ryan climbs onto one and bangs on the turret. He points out the enemy about 180 meters to the south and urges the tankers to engage. The crews open fire with machine guns, breaking up the attack, though they refuse to use their main guns for fear of hitting friendly troops. At 9:18, USS Ellison anchors roughly 4 kilometers north of Pointe du Hoc, awaiting fire missions from the shore party. At 9:29, a Ranger observation post directs her guns onto German light artillery positions concealed in trees 730 meters west of Pointe du Hoc. By 9:52, after expending 100 rounds, the shore fire control party reports the target neutralized. 1 minute later, a German battery near the same position opens fire on Ellison, its shells falling short. The destroyer replies immediately, and by 9:59, her salvos straddle the enemy site. Meanwhile, around 9 o'clock, the main body of Grenadier Regiment 916 launches a renewed assault on Vierville, following the earlier probing attacks. The situation forces a difficult decision. Colonel Schneider must choose between halting the advance or recalling the units already past the ambush point. He decides to let the forward elements continue toward Pointe du Hoc, while ordering the rest to fall back and regroup. Colonel Cannon instructs Companies A, B, E, and F of the 5th Ranger Battalion to remain in Vierville. This reduces the relief force moving toward Pointe du Hoc to about 400 men. The 4 companies of the 5th Rangers left in Vierville are ordered to improve the beachhead defenses. Company B renews the advance southwest from the western edge of town. Progress is slow, but several machine gun nests and numerous snipers are eliminated. At the same time, a platoon from Company A and another from Company F, supported by 4 Sherman tanks of the 743rd Tank Battalion, push south from Vierville. They clear out enemy snipers, machine gun positions, and several German combat patrols, killing about 25 and taking 85 prisoners. By 10 o'clock, Grenadier Regiment 916 reaches the northern edge of the village. At 10:22, USS Ellison fires 16 additional rounds before ceasing fire on order from the shore party to allow American infantry and tanks to advance. In total, she expends 124 rounds of 127mm ammunition. The Rangers, reinforced by the tanks, inflict heavy losses and halt the German advance by 10:30. At 11:30, the American flag is raised over the captured position. A small American force, supported by tanks, relieves B Company at the farm. The Germans strike again at 1400 with a company-sized counterattack, but E Company of the 5th Ranger Battalion breaks it up. After that, German pressure on Vierville fades, and by late afternoon, the position is secure. Task Force Metcalf's column moves cautiously west, advancing under sporadic sniper fire, but maintaining momentum. The force consists of one reformed company of the 116th Regimental Combat Team, joined by 2 companies of the 5th Ranger Battalion and the remnants of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, now reorganized into a Provisional Ranger Company under Captain Edgar Arnold. Together, they amount to roughly a battalion-strength formation under Lieutenant Colonel Metcalf of the 29th Infantry Division, with Major Sullivan serving as his executive officer. The Rangers and infantry clear 6.5 kilometers swiftly. The lead elements check every building along the route, rooting out snipers and small German rearguards. Communication with the supporting tanks is limited to visual signals and direct contact, but the armor gives solid support, using its guns to suppress strongpoints and break resistance. Captured prisoners later express disbelief at the pace of the advance. They describe it as a crazy attack that swept straight through multiple prepared defense lines on both sides of the road, an audacious thrust that defied expectation. Behind the leading elements, the 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion follows close behind, clearing bunkers and remaining enemy positions bypassed by the Rangers. The engineers' work prepares the ground for the construction of an airstrip east of Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. On the 8th of June, 1944, at 1800 hours, they complete Emergency Landing Strip A1, the first operational Allied airfield in Normandy. By 11 o'clock, the Rangers reach Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. The situation is tense. Reports of a German counterattack earlier in Vierville, combined with the constant expectation of encirclement, weigh heavily on the men. They are 5 miles from Vierville, effectively isolated, and fear being cut off at any moment. Advancing along the road toward Grand Camp, the column encounters a large crater blocking the route, likely caused by a mine. The tanks cannot pass and become scattered around the town. Captain Arnold sends a runner for a dozer tank to fill the craters and reopen the road, while Major Sullivan orders Captain John Rayan to inspect the tank positions and make sure they are ready for night defense. Rayan finds the tanks well placed. As he returns toward the roadblock, an artillery barrage bursts in the trees about 180 meters ahead, showering fragments across the column. Men from the 116th Regimental Combat Team break and begin falling back through the crater. Recognizing several of his own Rangers among them, Ryan shouts their names and halts the retreat. With help from a few officers, he restores order and reforms the line short of the barrage zone. Beyond Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, the task force runs into fresh resistance near the hamlet of Le Guay. The tanks, delayed by the craters, are called forward. With careful maneuvering, they reach the front. The fighting is mainly small arms fire. No heavy artillery strikes the immediate area. The Shermans engage a fortified house guarding the junction. A direct hit reduces it to rubble. Only machine gun fire from the right flank continues. Communication with the tank crews is poor. Buttoned up inside their turrets, they cannot hear shouted orders. Captain Arnold runs forward under fire and pounds on a tank turret with his carbine to get the crew's attention. Bullets snap through branches around him. One round pierces the muzzle of his carbine, but he is unhurt. The tanks respond by firing into the flank defenses with 50 caliber machine guns, pouring belts of ammunition into the tree line. Ranger rifles and BARs join in, and German resistance begins to crumble until an 8.8 centimeter battery opens up, delivering the most intense shelling yet. The tanks pull back under heavy fire. At the edge of Le Guay, the point walks into an ambush. A German squad with 4 machine guns fires from prepared positions. 7 Rangers on a forward patrol are cut off by earlier shelling. They destroy 1 enemy nest and capture 12 prisoners, but lose 2 men killed and 3 wounded. Technician 5th Grade Ray, the standing bar gunner from Company A, again distinguishes himself, fighting on despite a wound. The countryside is left cratered and burning. When the barrage lifts, the 5 survivors rejoin the task force with their prisoners. French civilians later tell the Rangers that the shelling came from batteries at Mazy or Creekville. Shorefire Control Party 3 radios USS McCook, which relays the request for counterfire to USS Texas. Out of range, Texas assigns HMS Glasgow to engage the Mazy battery. At 1300, Glasgow opens fire, silencing the German guns and ending the bombardment. Under orders, Task Force Metcalfe withdraws to Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, halting about 730 meters short of Pointe du Hoc. There, they establish a perimeter with outposts and patrols. Exhaustion is setting in. The day's fighting has drained every man, but they have pushed the enemy back and held the ground gained. German artillery continues to strike the 1st Battalion, 116th Regimental Combat Team, causing 30 to 40 casualties, nearly a third of its strength. Even so, progress continues. The town and the main coastal road are secured, and German forces fall back in disorder. Yet no contact is made with Rudder's men at Pointe du Hoc. By afternoon, anxiety deepens. The Rangers scan the coastline for signals. There are none. Believing Rudder's force wiped out, Task Force Metcalfe requests naval bombardment of the point. The Navy refuses, replying that Colonel Rudder remains in radio contact with ships offshore. For the first time, the Rangers learn his men are still alive and holding their ground. A final push toward Pointe du Hoc is planned but never launched. In Vierville, fears of a renewed German counterattack grow. Colonel Cannon requests the tanks return to reinforce the village. The Shermans withdraw from Saint-Pierre-du-Mont before nightfall. That evening, a fresh German assault strikes Vierville. Company E of the 5th Ranger Battalion, holding the eastern sector, repels a determined company-sized attack, inflicting heavy casualties. By nightfall, Grenadier Regiment 916 ceases to function as a coherent fighting unit and begins to withdraw. Even so, scattered fighting continues around Vierville. In Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, an officer from the 29th Infantry Division arrives breathless with alarming news. He claims Vierville has fallen to a German counterattack and that enemy armor is advancing toward the Rangers' rear. The report proves false, its source unknown, but it convinces Task Force Metcalfe to halt all movement toward Pointe du Hoc and concentrate on building a defensive perimeter around Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. Radio contact with Vierville remains unreliable. Captains Rain and Wise decide that one of them must verify the situation in person. They flip a coin. Ryan loses. He sets out on foot toward Vierville. Along the road, he meets an officer from the 116th Regimental Combat Team, pedaling a bicycle in the opposite direction. Calm and unhurried, the man contradicts the alarmist report. He explains that the 175th Infantry Regiment, the division's 3rd Regiment, has landed and is moving through Vierville with tank support. He expects them to reach the Rangers within hours. This is the first solid confirmation Rain receives that the invasion is progressing beyond Omaha. Yet the promised support never arrives. The 175th Infantry Regiment is diverted south toward the Bayeux-Isigny Highway. The Rangers at Saint-Pierre-du-Mont remain without reinforcement that day. By 1600, D Company of the 81st Chemical Weapons Battalion reaches Vierville-sur-Mer. There, the commanding officer of the 116th Regimental Combat Team orders the company to provide supporting fire for the perimeter. Elements of the 81st are soon attached to Force C, becoming the Rangers' artillery, delivering both direct and indirect fire in support of the scattered Ranger positions inland from Omaha Beach. By 1900 hours, elements of the 116th Regimental Combat Team move into the eastern half of the sector around Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. The Rangers shift right to cover the western half, establishing a firm defensive line. That evening, long-awaited supplies arrive from the beach. The 2 surviving M375mm GMC half-tracks from the Rangers Mounted Cannon Company finally reach the front. They now rejoin the main Ranger force under cover of darkness. Their 75mm guns provide only limited fire support, but the vehicles prove invaluable for hauling ammunition and rations from Omaha Beach to the forward positions. Task Force Metcalfe establishes its defenses in 2 open fields south of Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. At 2000 hours, German artillery opens up again. Shorefire Control Party 3 radios USS McCook, which responds with counter-battery fire on suspected gun positions near Creekville. Later in the evening, HMS Glasgow joins the bombardment. Their combined fire neutralizes the enemy guns, and the shelling fades by nightfall. As darkness settles, the Rangers dig in. They remain frustrated at being halted short of Pointe du Hoc, but resolute in their defense of the flank, protecting the Omaha beachhead. Tired but alert, they continue strengthening their perimeter and preparing for any night attack. Captain John Rain decides to confirm whether Colonel Rudder and the 2nd Ranger Battalion still hold the point. He calls for volunteers. Sergeant Moody and Corporal McKissick of the 5th Ranger Battalion step forward. That night, the two men move out under cover of darkness, slipping through German lines during an ongoing firefight. The 2nd Ranger Battalion, still isolated on the cliffs, has endured a second night of heavy counterattacks. In the confusion, Moody and McKissick initially overrun Rudder's command post in the dark, then double back and locate it. Inside the battered perimeter, they brief Rudder on the situation inland, reporting the presence of friendly tanks and the establishment of Ranger and infantry positions at Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. Before returning, Moody, trained as a mortarman, finds a reel of field telephone wire. As they retrace their route, he unrolls the line behind them, linking Rudder's post directly to Rain's position. By dawn, the cable provides the first secure telephone communication between the forces at Pointe du Hoc and the Inland Ranger Command. For this mission, carried out under fire and deep behind German lines, both Sergeant Moody and Corporal McKissick later received the Distinguished Service Cross for exceptional bravery and initiative. Elsewhere that night, German snipers infiltrate back into Vierville-sur-Mer, where the remainder of the 5th Ranger Battalion continues to hold the perimeter. Company B conducts another sweep through the town, clearing the infiltrators and restoring order. By the end of the day, the Rangers have captured around 150 prisoners and killed roughly 80 German soldiers. Their own losses total about 40 men killed or wounded. Despite exhaustion, the line holds firm. The Rangers of Force C have secured the western flank of Omaha Beach, and for the first time since D-Day began, communication with Rudder's beleaguered Rangers at Pointe du Hoc is re-established. At 1 o'clock, new orders reach Vierville-sur-Mer. The 116th Regimental Combat Team, together with 3 companies of the 5th Ranger Battalion, is to move out at 0600 for Pointe du Hoc. By morning, the situation has stabilized. The German attacks on Vierville have been beaten back, and fresh reinforcements are landing steadily. The 29th Infantry Division now has all 3 of its regiments ashore. Overnight, the 175th Infantry Regiment has arrived and is preparing to push west. The 116th Regimental Combat Team is ordered to advance along the Vierville-Grand Camp Road. Its objectives are Pointe du Hoc, Grand Camp, and Mézy, with the ultimate goal of reaching Isigny. The 175th Infantry Regiment will move in parallel along the Bayeux-Isigny Road, a mission originally planned for the 115th Infantry Regiment. But after the German counterattacks of the previous day, the 115th remains south of Vierville, forming a defensive screen to protect the beachhead. Naval fire support remains active throughout the morning. The destroyer USS Harding patrols off Pointe du Hoc, maintaining battle stations as reports of enemy aircraft come in. At 5:35, USS Ellison is ordered to relieve Harding within the bombardment force. By 7 a.m., she establishes visual contact with the Ranger Shore Fire Control Party, and by 8 a.m., secure voice radio contact is confirmed. At 7:40, the destroyer USS Schubrick locates the German battery at Mézy-la-Martinière, firing from the eastern side of the Carenton estuary. The ship opens fire, silencing the guns, only for them to resume at 8:20, sending 2 shells dangerously close to her hull. Schubrick immediately returns fire in a 25-minute bombardment that finally silences the position. At 7:45, the USS Barton, a Benson-class destroyer, opens fire on the Château de Saint-Pierre-du-Mont along the Grand Camp-Vierville Road. Acting on coordinates from the Shore Fire Control Party, she targets both the chateau and a nearby grove of trees concealing a machine gun nest. The chateau, midway between Auguay and Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, has been used by German observers to direct artillery fire along the coast. Barton pounds both targets with repeated 5-inch salvos, 185 shells in total. Overhead, thunderbolts from the 9th Air Force strafe the grove, suppressing the machine guns. The Fire Control Party reports friendly Rangers operating nearby, so the destroyer adjusts its aim, concentrating on the upper floors of the chateau, where snipers are spotted. At 6:30, the remaining elements of Force C, 3 companies of the 5th Ranger Battalion, depart Vierville. They move with 2 battalions of the 116th Infantry Regiment and 16 Shermans from the 743rd Tank Battalion. The column reaches Saint-Pierre-du-Mont around 8:15. German resistance is light. Engineers constructing the nearby airstrip have already cleared most of the area. The 352nd Infantry Division, broken by its failed assault the previous evening, has withdrawn inland. Force C halts to allow the 3rd Battalion, 116th Infantry Regiment, to pass through. Stragglers separated since D-Day rejoin their units. At 9 o'clock, with Company B in the lead, the Rangers and Infantry of Force C turn right at the junction in Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, taking the coastal road west toward Pointe du Hoc. At 9:18, USS Ellison anchors 3.6 kilometers north of the point. At 9:29, a Ranger observation post directs her fire against German light gun positions hidden in trees about 730 meters west of the cliffs. The guns deliver enfilade fire along the beach, making them a high priority target. Ellison opens fire, expending 105-inch shells by 09:52. The shore fire control party reports the mission complete. A minute later, a German shore battery replies, its shells falling short. Ellison immediately counters, saturating the position with high explosive rounds. By 9:59, the German guns fall silent. At 9 o'clock, 1 platoon of Company A, Companies C and D, and 1 platoon of Company F from the 5th Ranger Battalion, together with the remainder of Companies A, B, and C of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, advance on Pointe du Hoc. Their objective is to link up with Rudder's embattled force. Meeting no resistance, they reach the cliffs by 10 o'clock. Colonel Metcalf and several Ranger officers enter Rudder's command post. After 2 days of isolation, the relief of Pointe du Hoc is complete. At 10:22, USS Ellison fires 16 additional shells before ceasing fire on order from the shore party, allowing the infantry and a supporting tank to move in. In total, she expends 124 5-inch rounds. By 11:30, the American flag is raised above the battered ruins of Pointe du Hoc. Confusion follows quickly. German positions near the western flak bunker remain active, and the 3rd Battalion, 116th Infantry Regiment, supported by 5 tanks of the 743rd Tank Battalion, moves to eliminate them. The plan is hurried, and the maps inaccurate. The tanks and infantry drift into the western perimeter of the 2nd Rangers line. The Rangers, short of US ammunition, are using captured German weapons. The chatter of MG-34s and MG-42s, unfamiliar to many infantrymen, echoes through the ruins. To the inexperienced ears of the 116th, it sounds unmistakably German. Panic spreads. The infantry opens fire, and mortars join in. Inside Rudder's command post, Lieutenant Eichner intercepts the tank radio net. He orders a ceasefire and pops a colored smoke grenade to mark the Ranger headquarters. Some tanks stop. Others, misreading the signal, resume firing. Several Rangers attempt to wave an American flag into view. Tank shells explode nearby, throwing them to the ground. 3 Shermans hit mines on the edge of the strongpoint. The firing continues until a patrol from Fox Company sprints forward. 1 Ranger officer charges across open ground, climbs onto a tank, bangs on the turret, and thrusts his pistol at the commander. Only then does the shelling stop. The brief but devastating incident kills 2 Rangers and wounds 4 more. The exchange lasts over 30 minutes before control is restored. The 2nd Ranger Battalion's shorefire control party remains active, exchanging fire with surviving German positions. Captain Harwood, the forward observer, is killed. Lieutenant Norton, the naval gunfire liaison officer, is wounded and evacuated. Lieutenant Coker offers his unit's fire support to Rudder, but the 2nd Battalion declines. Their position is secure and no further fire missions are required. By late morning, the relief of Pointe du Hoc is complete. At around 12 o'clock, the remainder of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, delayed near Saint-Pierre-du-Mont during the fighting of the previous day, joins Force A at the point. B Company is ordered to sweep eastward along the cliffs toward Pointe de la Percée. The area is being cleared by engineers constructing emergency landing strip A1. Most German positions are abandoned, but the Rangers capture several prisoners without loss before returning. Over the next 4 hours, the battalion reorganizes. Intelligence personnel search the burned-out German observation post atop the cliffs, recovering valuable documents, including the German Naval Pennant Code. The material is quickly transmitted to USS Ancon offshore. The cost of the battle is severe. Across the 2nd Ranger Battalion, 77 men are killed in action. Another 152 are wounded, many gravely. 38 are listed as missing, some presumed dead, among the shattered cliffs and craters. In the days that follow, a few of the missing reappear, having fought alongside the 116th Regimental Combat Team or evaded capture in enemy territory. But by any measure, the battalion has been bled white. The Rangers of Pointe du Hoc have completed their mission, but at terrible cost. And that concludes today's episode. With it, we bring to a close our series on the Provisional Ranger Force of D-Day. From their first days of training in Britain to the chaos of the Normandy landings, we've followed the journey of Forces A, B, and C, the men who scaled the cliffs, broke open the beaches, and fought across the Norman countryside. At Pointe du Hoc, Colonel Rudder's Rangers of Force A achieved the impossible, destroying the hidden guns and holding their ground against relentless counterattacks. At Vierville, Ranger Force B opened the western flank of Omaha Beach, clearing the way for the 116th Regimental Combat Team to move inland. And finally, Force C, the largest of them all, turned confusion into momentum, joining the breakout from Omaha and securing the link to Pointe du Hoc. Fewer than half of the Rangers who landed on D-Day would walk away unhurt. But through their courage, initiative, and refusal to yield, they helped turn disaster into victory, ensuring the success of the landings and the foothold that would liberate Europe. This has been the story of the Provisional Ranger Force, the men who led the way on D-Day. Join us next time for a special bonus episode where we follow the Rangers beyond Pointe du Hoc to their next mission at the Maisie Battery Complex. Hidden beneath camouflage and linked by underground tunnels, the Maisie positions remained one of the last active German artillery sites along the coast. In the days after D-Day, the Rangers advanced toward Maisie, fighting through minefields, flooded fields, and entrenched resistance to silence the guns once and for all. In our bonus episode, we'll uncover the forgotten battle for the Maisie batteries, a fierce and often overlooked action that marked the final chapter of the Rangers' campaign in Normandy. To explore more, including photographs, maps, original documents, and the full list of sources behind this series, visit www.worldwar2-ssof.com. Among the most valuable works we drew on the cover-up at Omaha Beach, the Maisie Battery, and the U.S. Rangers by historian Gary Stern. D-Day cover-up at Pointe du Hoc, the history of the 2nd and 5th U.S. Army Rangers, 1st May to 10th June, 1944. Also researched and written by Stern. We also relied on smashing Hitler's guns, the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc, D-Day 1944, by military historian Stephen J. Zaloga. Together, these works provide both the broad picture and the fine detail behind the Rangers' role in Normandy. They, along with many other sources, have guided our research for this episode. These stories remind us that the fate of entire campaigns often rested on the shoulders of small, elite units, those who led from the front, striking hard and holding fast in the face of overwhelming odds. Thank you for listening to the Special Forces in World War II podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Your support helps us continue to bring you more stories of courage, daring, and the unsung heroes of World War II. Be sure to tune in next time as we dive into yet another remarkable operation that helped shape the outcome of the war. Until then, keep your wits sharp, your courage steady, and remember, sometimes the most incredible victories come from the unlikeliest of places. See you in the next episode. I'm your host, Michael Wires, signing off. And that concludes this mission briefing, fellow warriors of knowledge. We've navigated through the trenches of information, delving deep into the battlefields of history. As we wrap up this episode in our campaign for understanding, remember that knowledge is your most potent weapon. Stay vigilant and keep sharpening your intellectual arsenal. We'll rendezvous again for another episode, continuing our relentless pursuit of enlightenment. Until then, keep your mind sharp, your curiosity burning, and your determination unwavering. Simultaneously, you are hereby alerted to our outposts on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, fortifying our information dissemination. Should you possess any pertinent intelligence to bolster our mission, transmit your findings with no hesitation. Your contributions shall be prominently acknowledged within the operational archives. Furthermore, for those prepared to provide substantial reinforcement, navigate to our Patreon forward base and enlist. Your support is integral to sustaining our forward thrust. Carry forth the legacy. Dismissed.